Okay, so picture this for a second. You're trying to sell something that you don't even own. Now, what if the thing you're trying to sell is a massive, globally recognized 7,000-ton iron monument? Sounds completely impossible, right? Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unraveling one of the absolute most audacious true stories in history. We're talking about a guy with a completely fake identity who somehow successfully sold the ultimate pride of France, the Eiffel Tower. And not just once, but twice. As we unpack this whole shebang together, you'll see this isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's actually a super fascinating look at exactly how the human mind works.
Okay, let's dive into this. I mean, how on earth do you actually pull something like that off? To really get it, we need to take a quick trip back to Paris in 1925. The Eiffel Tower was the undisputed symbol of French progress, right? Millions of tourists loved it, and to the locals, this thing was practically secret, completely untouchable. But in the summer of that year, a group of very wealthy businessmen became absolutely convinced that the French government was secretly looking to sell it off for scrap metal. And get this, one of them actually bought it. Now, here's the truly fascinating part. This wasn't done at gunpoint. There was zero violence involved. It was literally a crime of pure psychology.
Chapter 1: Selling Certainty. Meet the architect of all this deception, Victor Lustig. Long before he ever set his sights on the Eiffel Tower, Lustig had kind of cracked the code on human nature. He figured out super early on that extreme confidence could open doors that money literally never could. You see, he wasn't in the business of selling obvious lies. No, he sold absolute certainty. He operated on this core philosophy perfectly captured right here. Most people don't believe what they see. They believe what they expect to see. And man, he was a total chameleon. Born in what's now the Czech Republic, he was incredibly smart, really soft-spoken, spoke a bunch of languages, but his real superpower was adapting his entire personality to fit exactly what the person sitting across from him expected. Talking to businessmen, he sounded like a seasoned CEO. Dealing with politicians, he came off as highly educated and refined. People didn't trust him because he handed them hard proof. They trusted him because he looked and acted exactly like someone you should trust. Now, when you stack Lustig up against your typical criminals of the 1920s, it's like night and day. While the usual suspects were relying on violence, force, or just basic theft, Lustig relied entirely on psychology. He totally understood that if you try to force someone into a bad decision, well, they're going to fight back. But if you carefully set up a scenario where the victim logically persuades themselves into making that bad decision, they will literally hand over their money with a smile on their face.
Chapter 2: Building the Illusion.
Even a master manipulator needs a believable foundation to work from, right? And Lustig found his simply by reading the daily news. Back in 1925, French papers were absolutely plastered with articles complaining about how unbelievably expensive the aging Eiffel Tower was to maintain. Some journalists were honestly asking if keeping the thing was even worth the massive drain on the budget. So the media basically planted the seed. And this brilliantly illustrates how he harvested it. He didn't just walk into a random scrapyard and ask for cash. Oh no. He orchestrated this massive, flawless illusion. Step 1. He mails these highly formal, super official-looking invitations to the richest, most ambitious scrap metal dealers in all of Paris. Step 2. The letters demanded absolute secrecy, claiming the government was terrified of public backlash. Step 3. He brings them all together at one of the fanciest luxury hotels in the city, playing the role of a senior government official to absolute perfection. And then the ultimate flex for Step 4. He takes them on a private tour of the actual Eiffel Tower, explaining these fake dismantling plans right there, standing under its massive steel arches. Just like that, the impossible suddenly felt completely real.
Chapter 3: The Psychology of Deception. Let's hit freeze frame on the story for a quick second here. To really grasp how he pulled this off, we've got to look at the exact psychological weapons Lustig was using against these incredibly successful, wealthy guys. He wasn't using mind control or hypnosis. He was exploiting universal bugs in the human operating system. So the first major trigger here is authority. Lustig completely bypassed their initial skepticism simply by projecting absolute, undeniable authority. He wore the right suits, he threw around the right formal government jargon, and honestly, the most important part, he rarely over-explained. Master manipulators know this trick. The more you talk, the more you sound like a salesman. By staying super calm, keeping his answers brief, and just letting the businessmen fill in the blanks themselves, he became impossible not to believe. Moving on, the second psychological trigger is scarcity. Remember how those invitations demanded absolute secrecy? Now, a rookie con artist might worry that keeping a deal super secret would make people suspicious. But Lustig, he knew the exact opposite was true.
Telling these guys that they were part of a highly classified government operation didn't raise any red flags. It actually made the deal feel irresistibly exclusive. It triggered that massive fear of missing out on a scarce, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And that brings us to the third trigger, social proof. Notice how Lustig didn't just meet with one person, he invited a whole group of the wealthiest competitors in Paris into the exact same room. Think about the psychology going on there. If you're sitting in a swanky hotel suite, looking across the table at your absolute biggest, most cutthroat business rivals, your brain automatically assumes, well, this opportunity has to be legitimate, right? I mean, if it was a scam, why would all these other brilliant guys be sitting here? The mere presence of the group completely validated the lie.
Chapter 4. Choosing the perfect victim.
So, the trap is set. Now Lustig just has to pick the perfect mark out of the group. He quickly zeroes in on a scrap metal dealer named André Poisson. Now, Poisson wasn't necessarily the richest guy at the table, but he had something Lustig found way more valuable: this intense, burning desire to prove himself. Winning a legendary contract like this would instantly skyrocket Poisson to the very top of the Parisian business world. You see, con artists always choose victims whose emotions are louder than their logic. Lustig watched that room like a hawk. He wasn't hunting for the biggest bank account, he was hunting for the person with the strongest, most blinding ambition. Because when heavy emotions like greed or ambition or this desperate need for respect take the steering wheel, critical thinking usually gets shoved right into the trunk.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this is the brilliant twisting turning point of the entire scam. Lustig pulls Poisson aside into a private meeting. He leans in real close, lowers his voice, and confesses, "You know, government officials aren't paid very well." He was heavily hinting that he expected a personal, under-the-table payoff to guarantee the contract went to Poisson. Think about that. He actually asked his victim for a bribe.
Let's break down why this move was just an absolute stroke of genius. Logically speaking, a fake official wouldn't want to complicate a massive high-stakes scam by suddenly demanding a bribe. That adds totally unnecessary risk. But to Poisson's emotionally driven, highly ambitious mind, a corrupt government official asking for a kickback was exactly how he assumed these shady behind-closed-doors deals actually worked. So instead of waking him up from the illusion, the bribe request completely cemented Lustig's authority. Poisson was so desperate to land the deal, he cheerfully paid the massive purchase price for the tower, plus a hefty bribe straight into Lustig's pocket. Unbelievable. Literally hours later, Lustig vanishes into thin air. By the time Poisson finally realized he'd been completely played, the money was long gone. But here is the ultimate proof of Lustig's genius foresight. Poisson never even went to the police. Why? Deep, crushing embarrassment. I mean, to go to the cops meant publicly admitting he was foolish enough to think he could buy the Eiffel Tower. And even worse, he'd have to confess on the public record that he had actively tried to bribe a government official to get it. Lustig knew the victim's own shame would be the ultimate unbreakable shield.
Chapter 5. The unthinkable repeat. You'd think any normal criminal would just take the money and disappear forever after a legendary heist like this? But nope. With just unthinkable audacity, Lustig goes back to Paris only a few weeks later. He actually gathers a brand new group of scrap metal dealers, mails out new official invitations, books another luxury hotel, and tries to sell the Eiffel Tower a second time. But, you know, lightning rarely strikes twice. While the 1925 scam worked flawlessly, this second attempt hit a snag. One of the new businessmen got suspicious and tipped off the cops, forcing Lustig to flee the country just before they could nab him. And while his grasp of human psychology was truly on another level, no con lasts forever. Years later, after forging identities and running wild schemes all over the US and Europe, his mistakes finally caught up with him. Federal agents busted him, and the man who literally sold the Eiffel Tower spent his final years locked away on Alcatraz Island. Chapter 6. The Autopsy of a Scam. Let's move to and see how this builds into our final summary.
Let's see how this all builds into an understanding we can actually use today. Because the truth is, Victor Lustig's methods absolutely did not die with him in Alcatraz. We can literally map his exact historical actions straight to those universal psychological triggers we've been talking about. The fake ID and the fancy luxury hotel, that hacked our natural deference to authority. The secret invitations, totally weaponized scarcity. And bringing all those competing businessmen together, that artificially generated social proof. He didn't invent greed or ambition, he just engineered the absolute perfect story that gave those existing emotions permission to totally override logic.
And this brings us to a really crucial takeaway for all of us. We love to tell ourselves that sheer intelligence is enough to protect us from deception, right? But history proves that's just not true. Confidence can so easily masquerade as competence.
The next great con artist in the modern world isn't going to roll up and ask you to buy a Parisian landmark, but they are going to offer you an investment that sounds just a little too good to miss. They'll pitch a business opportunity that feels super exclusive. They are going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. Because ultimately, the greatest scams out there, they don't begin with obvious lies. They begin with trust. So the really crucial point to take away from this explainer is this. The next time someone is pressuring you to act fast, urging you to keep a secret, or asking you to just trust them without any solid proof, I want you to remember the guy who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. The absolute strongest defense against manipulation isn't just maintaining a baseline level of suspicion, it's awareness. It's understanding exactly how your own brain makes decisions. If you know where the triggers are, you can't be so easily hacked. So ask yourself, are your emotions currently a little louder than your logic?